Hello and welcome to the first of a new batch of things I would like to do once every month. That is a Q&A from my patrons. I have a Patreon, if you didn't already know, which you can look at patreon.com/PugHoofGaming, and I'd like to make that a bit more of a valuable proposition to everybody that supports me via financially via that way. So what I would like to do in future is do every month a Q&A so that my patrons can ask me questions on anything they'd like to, gaming related, life related, otherwise, and I will do my best to answer them. And it's something I wanted to do a hell of a lot last year, but I probably did a couple, so I'd like to sort of work towards making that a regular thing starting right here, right now, in future. So patrons will be able to ask me questions anytime via the Patreon's page. And what I will do is that we'll do one of these at the start of the month, and that'll be available to patrons as soon as it's available, while everybody else who isn't a patron can actually get that at the end of the month on the YouTube channel as normal. Usually it won't be one of my weekly videos, it'll be sort of an extra little thing for you, but because I've had a very busy week going on, I haven't had a chance to do a normal video, so I'm going to use the Q&A this month to be this week's video. So on with the questions. So I've got a bunch of questions from two of my patrons. So I'm going to start off with Ian A. Chapman's questions. And the first one that he gave me is, what single player games do you enjoy playing with cheats enabled? Now that's a pretty easy question for me. So I guess these days I tend to play games to finish and complete them. But there was a time when I had a lot of free time back when I was just, back a teenager at school and had long summer holidays with not enough games and plenty of time to play the ones over and over again that I already had. But the game that sort of kept me occupied for the longest time in terms of silly cheats had to be Perfect Dark on the Nintendo 64. And the reason why is because, as you probably already know, Perfect Dark had a ton of unlockable cheats that you would get by finishing levels on certain difficulties in certain times. And Perfect Dark had a great bunch of those. Some of them were more serious, like invincibility, all guns, things like that. But it had a lot of very, very silly ones, such as big head modes. But my personal favourite was a tiny mode where all the enemies in the game would be super, super tiny. And what I would used to do is basically get the infinite ammo cheat and all guns. And I'll basically, and there's also a mode where you could be invisible as well, which is a lot of fun. And what you could do is you could basically attach mines to people. And if they were particularly tiny, that sort of affected the physics somewhat, especially if you had the turbo mode enabled, which made everything faster. So you could strap a remote mine to someone's feet, set it off, and then watch them fly about 1 billion miles in the air, and it was just the most hilarious thing ever to me. And I would spend hours just doing that, blowing up people and watching them fly miles away. It's such a hilariously fun game. Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen anything that's topped it since then. But thank you for that question. That actually brought some really fond memories of mine of my Nintendo 64 playing days. The next question from Ian is, what drinks and snacks do you have when you pull a late night of gaming? A bit of a tougher question for me because it's been such a long time since I've done a late night of anything. I kind of go to bed quite early and I wake up quite early in the morning, so it's been a very long time since I've had an all-night gaming session. But I guess if I was to do one now, I think what my choice would be, I'd have for snacks, I think I'd have something dry, something not messy that I could just eat with one hand, like pretzels for example. I do love pretzels. They're small, they don't make a mess when you eat them, they're pretty compact, very easy to bite size or grab a whole load in your mouth and eat them. But of course, because they're salty, you need something to wash them down with. So in terms of drink, I'm pretty easygoing, to be honest. I tend to drink a lot of water these days, not so much fizzy drinks or alcohol. I'm not really a big drinker. But if I'm going to have to go for that sort of session and get some fuel for that gaming session, I guess I'd either settle for something like, if I was going non-alcoholic, it would probably be just a nice full fat Coke. Or if I was going for something a bit more alcoholic, I'd probably put something like Jack Daniels in it, or maybe go for some sort of light beer like a Corona, or even a cider if the mood takes me, because I do love a good cider. Great question. So the last one from Ian is, do you bother with mobile gaming? And my honest answer is, very rarely. Back when I was working for God is the Geek, I used to review quite a lot of mobile games, and very many of them were absolute crap. Very few of them were actually entertaining enough to keep my attention for longer than a couple of minutes. which is hard when you're expected to review them for some sort of embargo and deadline. So I've had a very bad experience with mobile games. Not many of them, I find most of them are just too repetitive, too much, oh, you need to get 3 stars on this. Oh, by the way, we're going to make this level really hard, so you're going to have to either wait time to play it or spend money. And I don't really sort of go for that. I think the last mobile game that I was probably truly addicted to, what's the name of it? It was like this game, it was like a sort of city game where you could sort of clone different sort of archetypes of jobs and mix them together, and it was a bit like SimCity but with sort of weird clone jobs that you could mess around with and unlock new ones. It was all very, very silly, but sort of one of those things where you sort of get quite addicted to it. I dabbled with Super Mario Run when it came out. Haven't played it in a long time, but I did get most of the coins and sort of had my fill of that game. Honestly, I don't see my views on mobile gaming changing soon. I kind of want to try out the Mario Kart mobile game when that comes out. But to be honest, if I've got a device on me at all times, it's usually a handheld console for proper, like the Switch, or even Game Boy Advance, or even my DS. If I know I'm going to be somewhere where I want to play, then I will play a proper console. If I haven't got any of those and I've got a bit of free time, I tend to watch a TV show or a film and something a bit more non-interactive. So yeah, mobile games, not really for me, but I can understand there are plenty of people out there that love them, and that's fair enough. We've all got opinions, and that's a good thing. But Ian's last question is, which game did you spend far too many unjustifiable hours of your life playing? I can tell you a game that I spent hundreds of hours playing justifiably. Burnout Paradise is a game that I think I've probably spent at least 200 hours playing over the past 10 years, and I do not regret a single hour of that because I love that game. It's one of my favourite games ever, and you can bet your arse that I cannot wait until the remastered version comes out in the next couple of weeks. I've got that week off work as it happens, so I'm going to be enjoying that a hell of a lot. But as for games that probably I spent too many unjustifiable hours of my life playing, probably the MMORPGs genre is something that probably I find that I used to play City of Heroes on the PC, and I loved that game. It was a lot of fun, but when I think back, I spent a lot of hours of that game not doing anything, or doing the most horrible, boring filler quests where it's like, go here, kill all these enemies, reach the exit, over and over again, or spending like 5 hours on trying to fight particular bosses as part of the team, which at the time was fun, but when I look back, it's like, well, what do I have to show for it? I don't remember I remember very little about my time playing that game because a lot of it was very monotonous, and that sort of leads me to realise that MMORPGs not really for me. But to be honest, I've got a lot of self-control these days. I find that if a game is taking too much of my time and specifically doesn't respect the time I put into it, I'll kick it to the curb and throw it away. Recently I started playing The Last Guardian, and I found that game too cumbersome, slow and plodding, so I stopped playing it after like a couple of hours and just took it back to the rental place because I just didn't really feel it, So yeah, time is precious, so I will spend as little time as possible playing something if I don't like it. Next up is a few questions from Jonathan Quilter, and he asks me, what are your 3 top arcade games? A bit of a tough one for me because I didn't grow up in the sort of the era of arcade machines. I'm 33, and as I was sort of getting at the age where I could go to arcades, they were sort of slowly disappearing. The only arcades I really ever think about going to was when the fair used to come to town, and they'd have basically pretty much a who's who of the best arcade machines of the time. So you had your Street Fighters, your Simpsons, your Turtles, your Terminator 2s. But as for the top 3 games that I like in the arcade, I think first up is probably Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. An obvious choice, but get 4 players on that machine and it's a hell of a lot of fun. It's a great brawler. I was a big Turtle fan back in the days, you can imagine, and it was like the quintessential Turtle gaming experience for me, especially after the awful NES Ninja Turtle game that I actually absolutely hated and never finished it without using cheats. So yeah, that's that one. Second, when I was a teenager and when I used to go out to places, arcade machines were sort of slow on the ground. You see them at bowling alleys and the occasional sort of Laser Quest or things like that. But there was one machine that I did always love, and yeah, it's a gimmicky choice, but Dance Dance Revolution, or Dancing Stage if you're here in Europe, that is a game. It sounds funny admitting it, but I love that game. And even now, if I do see a machine of Dance Dance Revolution, if the mood takes me, just put a pound in and just have a little go. Which is, you know, I'm not exactly the most energetic of people, as my figure shows you, but yeah, I love that game. I had the Mario GameCube version, which I absolutely loved and spent way too much time playing at home. I lost a fair bit of weight playing that as well, actually. I used to play it every night for about half an hour. I lost a fair bit of weight. Maybe I need to get that game again and give it another go. The last arcade machine on my list is a way more recent game, and that is a game called Star Wars Battle Pod, and it's a machine by Namco Bandai. And what it is basically, it's Star Wars, but you're in a cockpit and it's like a domed projector screen in front of you, and it basically engulfs your entire viewpoint. You've got almost like sort of surround sound effects. There's wind blowing in your face as you're moving along. It feels like the first time you go into that machine, it feels like you're actually moving. It's a flight simulator where you're not moving, and you get quite a sensation of moving, even though physically you're not. And the last time I played that game was probably on my stag do a couple of years ago. And it's a brilliant, Star Wars shooting game. You're basically in an X-wing or various different Star Wars ships. You're going through different things like the Death Star, Trench, and Hoth, and things like that. But it's a very, very good arcade machine. It's probably the last really awesome arcade machine I ever really saw, save for maybe the Mario Kart ones, which been around for a while. But yeah, love that game. And if I could ever afford that machine, I think it's like at least £15,000. You can bet I would love having that in there because it's just an incredible machine. So Jonathan's next question is, are there any consoles that you wish you had when they were originally launched? And I've got two answers to that. So the first one, as much as I love the Super Nintendo, I wish I owned one when it came out. I didn't get mine until about Christmas 94 or 95, whatever Christmas Donkey Kong Country came out. That was when I got my SNES, and I really wish that I had it when it came out in, was it 1991, 92, because I would love to have been there on the ground floor playing Mario World, Contra, a lot of those sort of early games as and when they were released. I remember playing the Super Mario World demo kiosk in a children's world or a Toys R Us, like so much, longing for that console, and although it took a long time for me to get that console, I wish I was there sort of on the ground floor. The other console is, I really wish I had the PlayStation when it came out. Back in those days, I was young, I was a kid. My parents would get me one console, and that was it for the generation. And for that generation, I happened to choose the Nintendo 64, which I don't regret. I had great times playing Mario, Zelda, everything else, but I kind of wish that I did have a PlayStation, if only because games were cheaper and there were much more of them, and more of my friends had PlayStations, so we could swap games, and obviously there's a piracy element as well, which we could have encased and got copied discs and things. But yeah, I didn't get a PlayStation until probably the early to mid 2000s. So yeah, I think I've definitely missed out there by not getting it the first time around. I've rectified it since then, but again, I would have liked it when it came out. So Jonathan's last question is, do you think either Sony, Microsoft or Nintendo will still be producing consoles in 10 to 15 years time? So there's been a lot of talk about this actually. Quite a few people think that after the Xbox One, Microsoft will quickly backpedal out of the console race completely. I'm not entirely convinced. Nintendo, I can see making consoles for many, many years to come. That's what they do. Especially now they've sort of gone from having a separate handheld and a console to having the Switch, which is both. They're sort of rationalising their resources. They've always been very good with money and not spending too much on hardware or, in terms of research. So I think that will keep them going for as long as they need to be. Again, Sony, they're doing really well. I'd say they're probably on top of the world at the moment. In terms of what they're doing with the PlayStation 4. It's a very popular system. The PlayStation has always been popular. It's never not been popular. Even if it hasn't been so popular in this country, in Japan, where honestly a lot of time it matters, it's been very successful. But Microsoft, yeah, I can't see them going out yet. I mean, maybe they might decide to maybe do one more console after the Xbox One, but to be honest, like, they've just released the Xbox One X, which is quite an ambitious system. It's very powerful, and they're doing a lot of clever things in terms of backwards compatibility. Things like they're going the extra mile at the moment, and that might be to sort of make the Xbox One a bit more popular. But I don't think they're out of doing the consoles. I don't think any of them are interested in sort of ducking out. But yeah, no, maybe we might actually see a new challenger to the phone. I mean, what with Oculus Rift and Vive coming in terms of VR, maybe someone is going to come up with a definitive standalone VR headset that doesn't need a dedicated PC. You know, maybe that's going to be the thing that adds like a fourth horse to the race. You never know. Stranger things have happened in the world of gaming. I mean, there was a time when in the mid 90s, you know, we had Sony and you had Sony, Sega, Nintendo, you had 3DO, you had the Jaguar, and all sorts of pretenders. So not that I'm saying we're going to get about 6 different console manufacturers, but you know, who knows in this crazy industry that we love so much. So that's all my questions that I got for this month. Thank you very much to Ian and Jonathan for sending in their questions. If you want to ask me a question, I'm afraid you're going to have to do me a favour first and support me via Patreon on patreon.com/pughoofgaming. In a minute you'll get a little link up here which you can look at and click. Please do support me financially. You can donate as much or as little as you want. It starts at $1, you know, which is barely anything. But you know, if enough people did that, then I could pay for all my server hosting costs. I can maintain my equipment, keep things running. All the money that you donate to me, I use directly on the site. Last week I did a video about the Mickey Mouse Capade NES cartridge, which I love doing. I bought that cartridge using money from the Patreon fund, and that's what I want to use it for. I want to use it for buying interesting things to make videos that you want to see. So please do support me via Patreon, and I'll be back next week for another gaming video. But until then, thank you for watching, and I shall see you around. Goodbye.